The photograph itself is just a wonderful patriotic image that shows Mishawaka recruits heading off to serve in World War I on May 10th, 1917. The building that they are standing in front of is the U.S. Post Office, which today is part of the Mishawaka-Penn-Harris Public Library. It's where the Heritage Room is. And once they got enough recruits, they decided, well, we'll make an event out of it. We'll have the men gather on the front steps of the post office, do a parade through town. The line of march was north on Church Street, so they would have crossed Lincoln Way and went down to First Street, so down the hill, and then west on First to Main, and then south on Main back to Lincoln Way, west on Lincoln Way 1 block to Mill Street, and then south on Mill to the railroad depot. And at that time, Mill went all the way through to the railroad tracks. Today, it hits the hospital and doesn't go through. There were perhaps several thousand people in the area around the post office. People were invited to just join the parade. And there was one account that referred to the crowd at the depot being even larger than the crowd that was in front of the post office. So the actual final farewell to those soldiers occurred at the passenger depot. And so you can imagine a crowd of maybe 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people just swarming around that train. And it would have been a really exciting moment in Mishawaka history. There's some really compelling stories that are represented when you look at that photograph. And those men, they don't know what lies ahead for them. They know they're going off to war, they're going off to France. But looking back, we know what happened to those men. 5 of those men, they died during their military service. One man died of disease, Paul Oppelt. He was a guard in Hoboken, New Jersey, and he developed double pneumonia and died there. 4 men died in combat or as a result of wounds from combat. Part of that group of 76 was Ben Fetters. And Ben was the man who was a prisoner of war. Ben survived by hiding underneath men who had been shot. And Ben lived a good long life. He died in 1975, and he and his wife are buried in South Lawn Cemetery. Floyd Godfrey's remains were brought home after the war. Joseph Vandeputte, the location of his remains is actually unknown. They were not able to recover remains. His name appears on a memorial in France for those men who were missing. And then Furman van Holsbeck is buried at an American military cemetery east of Paris. Don Bryan is buried in Plymouth. This image, when you look closely at it, there are wonderful patriotic signs, there are flags, and that picture indeed is worth far more than 1,000 words. We also encourage patrons to come into the library, go up into the Heritage Room. This photograph, you can look to the west and essentially be standing behind the back row of the men pictured in the photograph. Like you can be like behind the windows, seeing what they saw. Even though so much of Mishawaka has changed, it still helps you to feel like you're not very far removed from those men, to be able to essentially stand in their place, to look at that photograph, see those faces staring back at you across more than a century. And it's one of the ways that we can make history more personal and real is by encountering that photograph.